Thank you, Bart. Thank you, Bart, for this nice introduction. I will share my screen with all the participants now. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, because I'm in Belgium, I say good morning, but as a fact, it's afternoon already in Vietnam. Thanks a lot, BeluxCham, for allowing me to host this seminar, to present this seminar, because I would like to focus today a little bit more on a specific solution of Credendo. Now, who is Credendo? Let me start first with a brief introduction on Credendo. Credendo is the official export credit agency of the Belgian government. We were founded in 1921, so last year we would have huge celebrations because we existed for 100 years. But of course, there was this COVID pandemic, which hampered us from doing big festivities. And as a matter of fact, we are just crumbling out of still some sanitary measures and some COVID issues here in Belgium, as well as you are in Vietnam. The fact that we were created in 1921 and that we have over 100 years of experience in trade facilitation and trade finance and export credit insurance makes, of course, that we have a very big database of information on a lot of companies worldwide, because we have come across those companies in the past by the fact that Belgian companies were exporting to those countries and were supplying goods and services and equipment to those debtors. Now, as a matter of fact, we did not simply stay a Belgian export credit agency. We became a European trade credit insurance group. We are number 4 now within Europe. Okay, I have to admit there is a big difference between number 1, 2, 3 and number 4. But nevertheless, we are present in 15 countries in Europe with trade credit solutions. We are active in all segments of trade credit insurance, being it short-term credit insurance, medium long-term credit insurance, with or without guarantee of the Belgian government. We also offer guarantees in a limited number of countries within Europe. So we cover all the commercial and political risks of exporters facing the potential non-payment by their customers of the invoices which they have sent. Our mission is, of course, to support trade relations primarily from Belgian companies, but as we are present in 15 countries within Europe, also from, let's say, the European producers exporting from other European countries for short-term credit insurance. And we also look to come with mostly tailor-made solutions towards our customers. That's our big advantage, that as a matter of fact, we are very open to discuss with exporters how to organize the contracts, how to arrange the contracts, so that at that moment of time, it is a bankable and a credit insurance eligible transaction. And this, of course, in the field of our core business, being insurance, but also, as said, in the field of guarantees, which needs to be issued in the course of the export transactions. We also offer solutions in bonding and surety. And I would like to focus on that today, also with regards to financing of export transactions and also in the field of reinsurance. All this related to, of course, trade transactions and investments abroad. It's very important not to only cover the companies, but also to cover the banks who are organizing these exchanges of goods and services and facilitating those trade transactions. But we also participate in what we call the market window activities, being it that we participate with other insurance undertakings in larger projects in which we take a small portion or a small part so that we can do risk sharing. Our main objective is, of course, to turn uncertainties into opportunities for exporters, not only by offering trade credit insurance, but also to offer all kinds of solutions which relate to this export transactions. Our core values, which are underwritten by all of our employees, are of course that we try to be as close to our customers as possible so that they can really rely on us, that they can trust us, and that they can find bespoke solutions within Credendo. I find this picture of this tree with its colorful leaves and its deep roots very important because it illustrates the fact that not only we are a company which is very culturally diversified because we have a lot of people from different nationalities working at Credendo, we are also active, as already said, in 15 countries within Europe. So we have, of course, different nationalities, different languages which are being spoken. But the fact that we are already existing for 100 years means that we have been facing a lot of crises during our existence, but we are a strong oak tree with deep roots. So we can withstand difficult times, we can withstand times of crisis so that our customers really can rely on us and count on us through a long period of year. As already said to Bart before we started the meeting, we pay more and more and a lot of attention on the corporate sustainability and amongst other respect for human rights, integrity, environmental sustainability, fight against corruption. So we are fully committed to the United Nations SDGs. We have identified the SDGs for which we believe that our actions and our activities have a direct and an indirect impact on realizing those sustainable development goals. And at this moment of time, we know that there is a lot of attention going towards what Europe called the Green Deal, so green transactions. Bart also told me that in the month of November of this year, there will be a huge event in Vietnam. And perhaps by that time, Credendo has come up with some new solutions, some amended solutions with regards to the Green Deal or environmental solutions which need to be promoted within the framework of Belgian export. It's an ongoing work, but we will show definitely let all our stakeholders know, and then of course you will be also informed about it. Now, as already said, Credendo exists for more than 100 years. We are present with 17 offices in 15 European countries. We have about 550 employees. In 2020, we covered about 84 billion euros of transactions, of which, as you see, almost 1/4 is in the Asian area. 25.4% of our risks are situated in the Asian area. The fact that, of course, there is a free trade agreement between Vietnam and Belgium enables and facilitates trade between Belgium and Europe and Vietnam. And we hope that in the near future, we will be able to see more transactions and cover more transactions between Belgian exporters and Asian and Vietnamese buyers of Belgian equipment and goods and services. Credendo, as a matter of fact, is a group of companies. Due to legislation, we are obliged to make a difference between the activities which can benefit from a cover of the Belgian state, Belgian government, which are the activities of Credendo Export Credit Agency, and all, let's say, the private activities of Credendo, which are at this moment of time, due to the legislation, of course, lodged into different legal entities, which are entirely held by Credendo, but who can offer solutions. Solutions in the field of trade credit insurance, investment insurance, bonding, reinsurance, financial guarantees for Belgian companies, and financing. Now, if we as an export credit agency want to enable Vietnamese companies to buy Belgian machinery and equipment, we can offer a solution called the Credendo funded solutions. Now, what are the Credendo funded solutions? Well, as a matter of fact, it is a contract which is being set up between Credendo Export Credit Agency and a Vietnamese company willing to buy equipment and machinery, but who needs to be able to pay back this equipment and machinery over a certain period of time. Now, why did we come up with these funded solutions? Well, first of all, you need to know that the Belgian government declared that Credendo needs to do more to support small and medium-sized enterprises in Belgium exporting around the world. We were mandated by our Credendo board of directors to pay special focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. You need to know that in Belgium, and especially in Flanders, more than 95% of all companies are small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, these small and medium-sized enterprises are, of course, sometimes not the companies which the big banks lay their focus on. So it is sometimes a fact that the Belgian banks are not able to support those Belgian small and medium-sized enterprises whenever it comes to smaller trade transactions. At the same time, in a lot of companies, we see that the potential buyers of those Belgian goods and services face difficult access to adequate financing on their local market. So it is a two-side cutting sword, let's say. First of all, the Belgian small and medium-sized enterprises cannot find always a decent answer at their banks. And on the other side, the potential buyers do not have always adequate access to financing. So we wanted to reduce, as a matter of fact, this gap, this difficulty, by supporting Belgian exporters with the funded solutions. Now, we have developed, and develop is a strong word, we have developed two types of funded solutions. The first one we call forfeiting, and the second one is the buyer credit of Credendo. You also find more information on these products on our website. This is all freely accessible. So if you want to read more about it, please do not hesitate to visit our website. Now, what is forfeiting? Forfeiting is, as a matter of fact, a mechanism by which Credendo discounts towards the Belgian supplier a credit which he has granted to his foreign buyer, in this case, a Vietnamese company. The buyer credit of Credendo is a mechanism in which Credendo directly funds the foreign buyer, the Vietnamese company, willing to buy Belgian equipment. So it is a different solution in that sense that by forfeiting, we bypass by the exporter towards the buyer, the Vietnamese buyer, while in the buyer credit Credendo, we deal directly with the Vietnamese buyer. Now, we do not want to interfere too much with the Belgian banks for obvious reasons. And therefore, we have said, okay, we want to develop standardized terms and conditions, including that the minimum tenor of the credit which we give to the Vietnamese buyer is 2 years, and it can go up to 5 years whenever we are dealing with contracts of above $400,000 US. The maximum credit amount which we can offer towards the Vietnamese buyer is at the magnitude of 8 million euros. Now, of course, this is already quite a lot, you need to know that a couple of years ago, this was still limited to 5 million euros. But as the gap between what the banks can offer and what the buyers are looking for and the suppliers are looking for only widens, we need to follow this trend. So we have increased the maximum amount from 5 million euros to 8 million euros. What is the objective? Well, the objective is very simple. The goal is to boost exports from Belgian companies by offering funding to the Vietnamese buyers along with the commercial transaction. Of course, if we check the buyer and we discover that the buyer is not creditworthy enough, just to give already basic insurance for this transaction, we will not come up with a solution of funding. I will give you an inside information on this, namely that Credendo can only take risk on a foreign buyer up to 1/3 of the equity of the foreign buyer. So in case that we are facing an export transaction of, let's say, 500,000 euros, this means that the foreign buyer needs to have an equity of 1.5 million euros. Okay. Now, what is forfeiting? Forfeiting is a kind of, I think, very easy mechanism based on something which is existing already quite long within the financial sector, namely bills of exchange. So there is a commercial contract being set up between the Belgian exporter and the Vietnamese buyer for the supplies of machinery and equipment. At the moment that the machinery or equipment is being sold or being delivered and installed to the Vietnamese buyer, bills of exchange are being drawn and signed between the buyer and the exporter, and the exporter hands over these bills of exchange and all the additional documents to Credendo, meaning that at that moment of time, it is no longer the Belgian exporter who is relying on the payments by the Vietnamese debtor, but that this risk has been taken over by Credendo. We discount the bills of exchange, we pay in cash following the delivery to the Belgian exporter, and from that moment on, we will send either on a 3-monthly or a 6-monthly basis a bill of exchange towards the bank of the Vietnamese buyer, by which we instruct him to wire the money to Credendo. And this during the entire period, of course, of the credit which has been agreed upon between the exporter and the buyer. I have put an example on the right-hand side of the slide between a Turkish buyer wishing to buy a machine from a Belgian firm, whereas the Belgian machine manufacturer wishes to supply this machine and wants to grant him a payment delay of 2 to 5 years. And of course, the Belgian machine manufacturer does not want to finance this with his own means, but wants to rely on Credendo to be able to come up with a financing in favor of this Turkish, or let's say Vietnamese buyer in this case. You see an amount of 300,000 euros. Well, let's say that the average ticket size which we see for this kind of solution is in the range of 350 to 400,000 euros. So it is specifically aiming at Belgian small and medium-sized enterprises exporting a machine or a couple of machines towards a Vietnamese buyer or another buyer elsewhere in the world where we offer this solution, who do not find immediately a solution at their bank and who do not want to hold the financial risk within their own books. The tenor which we see for those types of contracts are between 3 and 5 years. We hardly see any transactions with a tenor of 4 years. We mainly see transactions with a tenor of either 3 or 5 years. Of course, it is also possible to come to Credendo for lower amounts, but we regularly normally look at transactions with a credit amount starting at 100,000 euros in that range. Okay. Now, for less risky countries and for, let's say, higher credit amounts going above 2.5 million euros, it becomes often difficult for a small and medium-sized enterprise to wait until the final delivery of the goods and equipment or until the final installation of all the equipment to be able to wait until that moment of time before they get their money from Credendo, before they get the discounted value of their supplies. Okay. I just wanted to mention one more thing, which is also very important. In both of the solutions, being a buyer credit of Credendo or a forfeiting, we need to comply, of course, with the regulation of the OECD, stating that there needs to be a down payment, an advance payment of at least 15% by the Vietnamese buyer. So in case that we have a contract of, let's say, 500,000 euros, there needs to be 75,000 euros at least, which is paid upfront by the Vietnamese buyer, meaning that still 425,000 euros can be granted by Credendo in terms of a loan, in terms of a repayment schedule over a period going up to 5 years. Okay. To be complete, of course, in my explanation. Now, as already said, for bigger contract amounts, it is often difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises to wait for a longer period of time before they get the discounted value from Credendo for the delivery of equipment and machinery. So there we always examine whether it is possible to directly grant a buyer credit to the Vietnamese buyer in this case, so that the exporter during the production period of the machines can draw on that buyer credit in order not to have to wait and to pre-finance the entire production period. It can take, for example, an entire year for the Belgian firm to produce the entire number and amount of machines and equipment which have been ordered. And that would, of course, jeopardize the cash flow situation of the Belgian exporter. So therefore, it might be more interesting to see whether a buyer credit is a more suitable solution. For a buyer credit, OECD regulation and EU law imposes on Credendo that our interest rates are in line with the interest rates which are offered by the local banks on the market where the buyer is situated. Meaning that at that moment of time, the structural advantage and the advantage for the Belgian exporter to offer, let's say, a rather cheap financing to the Vietnamese buyer is, of course, a little bit put on the side and a little bit jeopardized because our financing will be in line with the cost of the lending which you face in Vietnam. I have put an example here of a Mexican agri-food firm wishing to place an order for filling and packaging line with a Belgian firm, amounting up to 3.8 million euros. As we already have good payment experience and we are entitled and allowed to offer buyer credits directly on the local market in Mexico, here the buyer credit of Credendo was a better suited solution to offer instead of the supplier credit. Now, one of the questions which you will have, of course, is how much is this cost of funding? How much do I need to pay as a Vietnamese company to have access to this finance? Okay. When we do an analysis on a buyer, we rank them in a category going from 1 up to 5, being 1 a very good debtor and being 5 less good debtor. Let's put it that way. We also start with a country classification where we make a difference between short-term credit insurance and medium long-term credit insurance. And these solutions, they are especially situated in the area of the medium long-term credit insurance. Now, before I start with this, the traditional insurance products, I would like to go a little bit further in my presentation, and I would like to come to the country risk assessment of Vietnam. Okay, I will go back in a few minutes. This is also information which you can find on our website, not only for Vietnam, but for all the countries to which we export. And we gave a political risk category to all the countries going from 1 to 7. You see short term, you see medium long term, you see the premium classification of the OECD, and you also see the business environment risk, which we assess for Vietnam. The solutions which I have pointed out are situated in the medium long-term solutions which we offer. There you see that, as a matter of fact, Vietnam is in the middle of, let's say, the political risk range which we foresee, namely a category 4 on a scale from 1 to 7. What does this mean? This means that a very good qualitative debtor in Vietnam, which needs a credit on a tenor of 5 years, will pay an interest rate of 5.10% at this moment of time to Credendo, to be able to have access to machinery and equipment coming from Belgium. A debtor which is in the second category, so in the a little bit less credit worthy, will pay 5.28% on a tenor of 5 years. The worst creditworthy debtor will pay 7.9% to Credendo on a tenor of 5 years. Now, I had a little look at the bank lending rate in Vietnam to prime borrowers at this moment of time. And I found out that this is, at this moment of time, 7.65%. So you need to compare those 7.65% with the 5.10%, which you as a Belgian exporter can offer to the Vietnamese buyers, or which the Vietnamese buyers of very good quality could get from Credendo whenever they want to purchase machinery and equipment from Belgium. Now, if we compare a little bit Vietnam with some other countries in the region, you see that Vietnam is also a very good student within the class. They are not the first within the class, but I give you a few examples. For Thailand, for example, the short-term political risk category is also category 2. The medium long-term category for the political risk is category 3. So it's just one category of difference. While the business environment risk for Thailand is in a category E. So difference of 2 notches compared to Vietnam. Okay. If we look at Indonesia, for example, there on the short term, we categorize Indonesia in a category 1. In the medium long term, Indonesia is also in a category 3, just like Thailand is. So just 1 notch difference with Vietnam. And the business environment risk is category D. So 1 notch lower than is Vietnam. If you look at the big brother in the area, let's say China is in a category 1 for the short-term political risk category, in category 2 for the medium and long term, but also has a business environment risk category D, so less favorable than the business environment risk within Vietnam. Okay. Now let me return to the traditional transactions. Of course, it might be that the outcome of the assessment which we do on the financial strength of the Vietnamese buyer or potential buyer is that we cannot grant a financing solution towards the Vietnamese potential buyer. Nevertheless, we will of course try to cover the transaction with one of the traditional insurance products of Credendo. And the first traditional insurance policy of Credendo is, of course, an insurance policy of cash payable transactions, where you have, for example, a schedule of payments based upon milestones. This is an export transaction where there is not a credit granted by Credendo or no credit structure of a bank behind it. But it can be that the supply of the capital goods and services are payable on base of a letter of credit. And of course, this letter of credit can foresee some payment delay, okay? So it is a transaction which is, let's say, for us, quite comparable to short-term export transactions because those milestones and those invoices are regularly paid within 30 to 90 days after that the milestone has been achieved and arrived, okay? We see this traditionally in dredging works, in construction works, in engineering contracts, but also in the supply of machinery and equipment, where, for example, at the moment that the goods are being ordered, you have a first payment, an advance payment of, let's say, 10% or 15% or 25%. When the machine is being finalized in the factory in Belgium, you might have a factory acceptance test. Based upon this, the results of this factory acceptance test, there might be a second payment. Then you have the shipment of the goods. When the goods arrive in Vietnam, you will have another payment which is being asked from the Vietnamese buyer. And then afterwards, when the equipment is being installed and up and running, the final payment is being done. We can intervene, as a matter of fact, with insurance of the Belgian exporter towards the Vietnamese buyer. This might convince the Belgian exporter to sign the contract with the Vietnamese buyer, given the fact that we will cover the risk of cancellation during the execution of the contract and also the risk of non-payment by the Vietnamese debtor. Okay, I have given here an example. It can be that the Belgian supplier receives a request from the Vietnamese buyer to give him a longer payment delay, a longer term for paying for the equipment and the services and the goods, which we call, as a matter of fact, a supplier credit. For a supplier credit, the delay of payment which is granted to the buyer is ranging from 2 to 5, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. The supplier does not want to keep this risk in his own books, but of course he wants to sign the commercial contract with the Vietnamese buyer, and he comes to Credendo and asks us for an insurance. We will cover during the entire tenor of the credit the supplier against the risk of non-payment, and of course we will also, during the execution period and the production period, cover him against the risk of cancellation. The supplier might go back to a bank and ask the bank to discount this supplier credit in case the bank says yes. Okay, but as already mentioned, it is not always that obvious, especially not for small and medium-sized enterprises, to get a discounting by a Belgian bank. Then, of course, we will also not only cover the exporter, but also the bank against the risk of non-payment of the discounted supplier credit during the entire tenor of the supplier credit. Again, here, there is OECD arrangement rules in place, being at least 15% down payment. There are maximum repayment terms, and the repayment needs to be done by means of equal installments up to 6 months. So it can be 3 months, it can be 6 months. Okay. Again, one example. And then, of course, for big contracts, it might be that a Belgian bank is willing to offer a direct financing towards a Vietnamese company. In case this would not be the case, we still have potentially the solution of the buyer credit offered by Credendo. Of course, the interest rates will be less interesting than the interest rates which can be offered by a Belgian bank at this moment of time, given the fact that funding by Belgian banks at this moment of time is still very interesting. Okay, interest rates are rising, but anyhow, it's still more interesting to go to a bank instead of coming to a lender in last resort, being Credendo. Here again, we will need to ask an initial down payment of at least 15%. There are the OECD regulations which impose a certain strict form on us and on the bank. And especially you need to know that it is for major sums and longer terms. We see especially buyer credits in contracts with governments, or when we have huge infrastructure investments or bigger investments in machinery and equipment going from ranging from 10 million to 25 million or even more. It can go up to several hundreds of millions. Essential here is to know, of course, that it is not only Credendo who's at stake at that moment of time. It is especially the bank, the financial institution of the exporter, who needs to believe in the creditworthiness of the Vietnamese buyer. Again, an example. Now, I would like to end with giving you this vital information. Credendo, as a matter of fact, is a publicly held entity. So all the information which you can find on our website is freely accessible, okay? This is the new version of our website. You can find information on countries under the header country risk. You can find all information under the header solutions. You can try to find a solution by filling in some questions under the find what you need, and under the knowledge hub you will find all the interesting articles which we publish on all the countries which we are looking at this very moment of time. You can also, as a matter of fact, download our risk app. At that moment of time you will have access to all the information which I have given to you. You will have access to a country risk assessment immediately. You will see all the parameters immediately at a glance for each country which you have selected. But also very important is that whenever we do a publication on a country, you will get a push message on your screen, and you can read the publication, the risk analysis, and the background stories directly on your smartphone. That's very interesting. Please download the app. Feel free to do so. And I'm sure that you will see the quality of our publications. I wanted to end with this nice view of Ho Chi Minh City, and I would like to thank you for your attention also in your own local language, which I cannot pronounce. I'm very sorry for that. If you need to contact me, you have all my contact details. The Belux Chamber of Commerce will send you the presentation afterwards, so that whenever you feel a need, you can always contact me when necessary. So this is for me for today. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that we will be able to turn uncertainties into opportunities together. Thank you.
Well, Wim, thank you very much for this presentation. I can imagine that some people are very interested to know more, but need to digest the multitude of information which you have given. So don't worry about that, dear participants. As Wim said, we will make sure that you receive the PowerPoint presentation as Wim has just shown us, as well as send you a link of the complete recorded webinar this afternoon. So then you have all the time to listen and digest maybe a bit easier whatever potential solution was given for your insurance of your export. Let's have a look if there are at this moment any questions. There was a question before asking to make the PowerPoint available. That's by this answered. So is there any other question at this moment which you would like to ask Wim Bosman? Then please go ahead. it looks like at this moment either everyone is totally clear or people need a bit more time to digest what was being said. I have a quick look here at my own phone, which started to beep. Just a minute. No, that's something else. One more last chance for this webinar. If there are any questions, please feel free to speak out now. If not,
I have a question. Is Credendo also offering solution for a Belgian which wants to develop a new business in Vietnam, like including building a factory?
Yes, we have first of all a solution called the political risk insurance for investments, by means of which we cover the Belgian investor against the risks, the political risks, also the risk of expropriation, the risk of business interruption, etc. So that is a first solution. Secondly, when this investment is, let's say, an extension of the Belgian activities of this company in Belgium, and they set up a new subsidiary or a new company in Vietnam, and there is some kind of bank loan or some kind of bank loan coming from a Belgian bank towards the parent company in Belgium to be able to create the entity in Vietnam, we can also consider to give a financial guarantee to the Belgian bank financing the project, so that the willingness of the Belgian bank to provide this investment credit is being facilitated by Credendo. This is normally a financial guarantee of 50% of the bank loan. So in case that you need, for example, 2 million euros to set up a new company in Vietnam with your Belgian company, you go to the bank, you ask for 2 million euros. In case that the bank says, okay, we will grant you 2 million euros, but we need to cover from Credendo or guarantee from Credendo, the Credendo guarantee will be 1 million euros. What is the advantage for the bank?
I think we're losing you there, Wim.
The bank offering the loan. So at that moment of time, they can immediately write off the 1 million euros which are supported and guaranteed by Credendo. In case you want to elaborate more on this, because we can discuss about it during, let's say, an hour and a half at least, just to have already a preliminary introduction, please feel free to contact me.
Okay. Anyone else? Any question? If not, I will conclude the webinar. I see no other hands coming up or other questions. Then I would like to thank you very much, Wim, for your interesting presentation, for the multiple solutions which Belgian companies or European companies can have to ensure their exports to Vietnam. I would like to thank our co-hosting Chambers of Commerce, and especially our sister organization BVA, the Belgian Vietnamese Alliance. Thank you very much for your attendance. As I said, we will send you the PowerPoint presentations as well as the link to the recorded webinar. I wish you a very, very nice afternoon here in Vietnam, or for those people in Belgium, a better continuation of the morning. And we see each other soon again. Stay COVID safe. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.